Hello, my name is Osha. I like talking about American presidents, and I've been talking about color of law violations that I've been experiencing in Montgomery County, Maryland, and this is the second part of my discussion on my experience as a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow. Uh, so I've gotten up to the point where I was hired, and this was in 2021. Um, yeah, 2021, I started my appointment as a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow in the Office of the Secretary of Defense at the Pentagon. So now, some things I want to quickly state though. When you become uh, U.S. federal government employee or official. So depending on what level you are, right? So if you're called a U.S. federal government official, right? It's synonymous official, officer, or agent in the federal civil service. These are synonymous terms, right? So in terms of your agency represents the US government, right? And because the McCain Fellow, for instance, is a senior leadership career path, right? They're officials, like they're called officials. And so those are I like to use just say employee, right? I like to just say employee. So you are said to represent the United States government. So you take your oath. And then you to always protect and defend, uphold the U.S. Constitution. Right. That's the oath that you take, and so you everything you do, you're now said to represent the United States government. So you have to be very careful. That's why they're very careful in the U.S. federal government on whom they hire, at a certain level, because your acts can be deemed actions of the United States government, right? So you have to be very careful, and that's why they're very careful. You just don't associate with people regularly anymore, especially if you're in national security, right? You're in national security, you're in an area that's sensitive. You can't just um, associate freely with people anymore because your acts are deemed to can be deemed to represent the United States government. And so, of course, I'm talking about discrimination that I experienced as a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow. Was it Lloyd Austin that discriminated against because he was Secretary of Defense then? No, because the thing is, um, I talked about eventually. I did file an equal employment opportunity complaint. I filed, officer special counsel complaint. You know, those when you see the titling of the complaint, because an investigation is now conducted and it's official, it will say Olurotimi Osha, the complainant, versus the head of the Department of Defense. That's versus Lloyd Austin. Was it me? Was it Lloyd Austin I went to report? No. So the thing is, they try, because they take violations, right, or misconduct or any lapses, right. They take them very seriously in the U.S. federal government. So any complaint, anything that now amounts to an investigation, it is supposed to reflect on the head of the agency so that they take it seriously. Because again, it's the United States government, it's the civil service. It's supposed to be merit based, and then we're public servants, right? We're serving the public, and it's taxpayer dollars. We don't make profit like private industry does, but we're supposed to be good stewards, good shepherds of the purse of the American people, right? Of the taxpayer, of the taxes, the money of the American people. We're not supposed to waste it. So waste is actually illegal. When you waste taxpayer dollars as a public servant working in the federal government, it's deemed misconduct, waste, abuse, fraud. Definitely fraud anywhere, just like in the private sector as well. mismanagement, right? Those are deemed misconduct, illegal. Those are abuses, right? So, and there are also protections that everybody has, right? Protections in terms of non-discrimination, non-hostile work environment. So these are protections that are, if you make a complaint if you make a complaint about any one of those uh, things, then it becomes a matter for investigation. It's taken seriously, and it can have severe consequences, which probably only it only causes it causes more lapses in the federal government from my experience, just because any accusation, any um, insinuation of apparent or real um, abuse in terms of discrimination, in terms of harassment, bullying, because it triggers an investigation that can have severe consequences. It's documented. They now have this excessive blowback against it. So instead of it being able to be resolved easily, it has these severe consequences that um, fraud is now it creates an atmosphere, a general atmosphere of dishonesty, because people do not try and report misconduct, right, and things like that, because it goes into somebody's file, and everybody feels this angst, this anxiety, because it's in their file, and so uh, there's a general atmosphere, general agreement of collusion not to report misconduct, and if they do, it is to scapegoat somebody and destroy that person, eliminate somebody in their career, remove them. Anybody who raises an instance of misconduct, even something trivial, like, oh, somebody insulted them. It's they make a mountain out of a molehill, and so they cover it up, right? They cover it up. They end up destroying the victim, right? And because it becomes a case of, well, the victim versus the Secretary of Defense, the head of the agency, and so you know, so there's this cover up, and the perpetrators immediately, the perpetrator is your boss, because maybe they're higher than you. It's normally the case, they're higher than you. The perpetrator immediately retaliates, right? And say, well, that you're the person, you're causing problem, you're toxic, you've abused. They fabricate things, or maybe you made a threat. And from my experience, that was what I found out. So they fabricate and falsify records, things that are illegal, right? Just to save their It's not even to save their job, but just to save their image. They don't want something negative documented against them. So they have this culture of dishonesty, at least in the Department of Defense and the Department of the Navy. That was my experience. So they don't resolve crisis. So you see there's entrenched dishonesty. It's like institutionalized corruption in the Department of Defense and the Department of the Navy. So they don't address issues. So it's not a good environment. It's a toxic, hostile work environment. In the private sector, it's conflict is part of life. So you have a little conflict, you resolve it, right? Your manager, the person, you resolve it. We don't have crazy people in the private sector who carry about guns, and conflict is, everybody will have some kind of conflict, because it's part of life. If you don't have conflict with someone, then you are a zombie, or you're pretending you're not being honest, right? Because people, there are differences. Human beings, everybody is different, and so even in the private sector, I was very successful, right? In banking and finance, very very successful. Was I conflictless? Was it a conflictless environment? No, but these things are easily resolved, and it creates you have a way to resolve conflict, and it improves working solution. In the DoD, in the Department of Navy, from my experience, um, they pretend it doesn't exist, because immediately somebody raises an issue, they eliminate that person, right? They eliminate that person. They cast aspersions on the person's character. They defame the person. They start to document, falsify the records. This is actually the practice in the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy, and the experts are doing that. It's dishonesty. So it's ironic that you know somebody. So in the federal government, when somebody raises an issue that, okay, there's a problem, right? Even if it's trivial, it's considered in the federal government as um, anything any complaint that they raise, right? It's considered a protected matter, right? It's and that's it can be investigated, so it's a protected action, right? And so any re- retaliation is automatically prevented, and there's a law that protects that individual who raises the issue. It's called Whistleblower Protection Act. It prohibits retaliation, like termination, uh, bad performance review. It prohibits any form of retaliation against the person who raises an instance of misconduct or any form of violation of the law, because if there's illegality, if you observe illegality in the federal government, you're supposed to expose it. You're supposed to raise an issue, right? But and so that whistleblower protection is supposed to protect you, right, from being terminated in your job, or having a poor performance review, or being given less work, or being moved to another department, or being suspended. So that's a Whistleblower Protection Act. Unfortunately, like I said, I would learn that anybody who raises any issue, they start to the higher people hire, right, and they immediately cast aspersions on the person, and start to do like a they have a reprisal immediately against the person. And so that was my experience there. um, so the government wasn't quite working the way the laws wanted to work. That's in the Department of Defense and the Department of the Navy. um, again, I was so honored to have been hired as a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow. Again, it's a senior leadership track to be a future leader of the Department of Defense, right? That's impressive. The Department of Defense is the largest department in the U.S. federal government. It's virtually half of the U.S. federal government. It's the largest department in the world. It has, the largest budget of any government department of the world, about $1 trillion, right, um, per annum. So, and it's a complex organization, very complex. I was very fortunate that as a John S. McCain Fellow, right, there were things the things that were part of a package, a large package, to attract McCain Fellows into the U.S. government. For instance, they paid relocation expense of about $5,000. That's a big deal in the U.S. government. They pay you your relocation expense. They for $5,000. Of course, that's not a lot, but it's huge. Um, it was huge for me. They pay your continued education for someone that like me, that I love. They give you money to go and study whatever it is you want to study. That's another $5,000. They give you an individual development plan. They give you so many things. Apart from the where you start. So in the federal U.S. federal civil service, there's something called the GS schedule, right? And so now the John S. McCain Fellowship is they hire you from between the GS 10 and 12 now. GS 10 and 12. That's what you're, and there's GS 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, now, but you come in as a McCain Fellow as a GS 10 or GS 12, so you don't start from the bottom, and the highest is GS 15. Now, as a McCain Fellow, after you finish, you can actually jump, because based on your performance on your previous background, because they when I started, right, they wanted to equalize everybody that comes in. Some people will come in with more experience. Some people come because they have advanced degrees, right? Some people may have PhDs, plenty of experience. Some people may have a JD, like me. I had a JD, I had an MD, I had plenty of experience. But all of us, when we started in my time, we were all GS10. So there was no GS10 in the US Federal Civil Service. In fact, the GS10 was created by Congress specifically for the McCain Fellows, right? So they wanted to equalize us. So it's higher than a GS9, right? And, it's, and they, because some people were GS, so in federal civil service, it's actually the normal path, the normal ladder is a GS9, it goes to GS11. There's no GS10. There's GS12, 13, 14, 15, but they don't have a 10. So the Congress created that 10. That's a McCain Fellow, right? So McCain Fellow would come in, start as a GS10. It's not a 9, but it's really like an 11, right? It's really like an 11, but they wanted to make sure that everybody would be at the same scale, right? And so that's every McCain Fellow will be at the same scale. So that was why they created the GS10. I've seen they made changes in the National Defense Authorization Act in 2024. Of all McCain Fellows, so I filed a complaint. So that may have been part of a result of complaints that I filed, right? I filed these complaints that are supposed to be ongoing. I was given a right to sue, but that's why I've been saying that this malicious prosecution that's going on in Montgomery County, I was locked up in jail, right, when I was given a right to go and sue in the district court against the Department of Defense. So that time expired. And it happened twice. Every time I have a deadline or something going on, I would be locked up. So that's why the Montgomery County Circuit Court case is actually a malicious prosecution. They're friends, they're people I know who are in the military majors, and they were the ones who said, look, when you have a complaint against the DOD, especially the federal government, there are certain areas, right? They're lawyers, they actually have departments, right, that work with other agencies, right, in local areas. And they have them, they're acting as like agent provocateurs or whatever, they as agents on behalf of the main federal government agency to go and sabotage, frame that person to obstruct justice. So it's like a cartel. It's illegal. That's why the federal government created the RICO Act, Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization. So you find that what I'm experiencing is actually a RICO violation. Now, if they can find the actual, prove the actual Department of Defense attorneys and agents, leaders who did it, they can be criminally prosecuted because that's a RICO violation. So that's what I'm experiencing right now. So they fabricated a crime because I was just in my home, nothing. And there's evidence, again, I did forensic science, I'm a lawyer, I'm an auditor. That's what I was doing for the federal government. It's interesting, as of the time this thing happened, I was actually supporting Naval Criminal Investigative Service, right, in a classified area. I was not in Naval Criminal Investigative Service. I was in Naval Audit Service. But part of our work as auditors in Naval Audit Service is some of us, and like me, I was taken to actually support Naval Criminal Investigative Service. That was my job. So I know how the agencies work together. Naval Criminal Investigative Service. In fact, I think their headquarters is within the FBI department. So like they're the FBI of the Navy, right? And so NCIS, there really is an NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. So I got a lot of training. When I was in the Navy and the DOD, so all the money that the U.S. federal government has spent on me, I don't know what it is that they intend to do with it, since they're letting this bizarre false charges has taken 3 years of my life, because they invested a lot in me, right? A tremendous amount in training. I was just, it's just sent me to courses. Defense Acquisition University, that's a corporate university within the Department of Defense. It just sent me to train different places that they sent me to school for training. So it's funny, and of course I love learning. Um, so when you join the U.S. government, you're now considered like you're representing the U.S. federal government. In fact, anybody who assaults you, attacks you, or does anything to you during it's like there's a law for it. They've attacked the United States government. There's actually a law for it, and that's why also your actions. So, if I report my colleague, my boss, my immediate boss, it's the U.S. federal government that I'm reporting, right? And they're saying that there's something wrong in the government, and so that they take it very seriously. And so you would see that the complaint will be against, like the head of the agency, like the Secretary of Defense. If somebody who works in the DoD, they make a complaint of harassment, right, against their boss or their colleague, if there's supposed to be an investigation, and the case would be, against the current Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. So that's how it goes. It's not really Pete Hegseth himself, but it's the head of the agency, right? That's you know the in the inside investigations you see then where there's actually the statements. Everything is done on them under penalty of perjury. In the actual body of the investigations, then they will name the responsible management officials, but the authority um, that they're doing it under, it would be the head of the agency. So that's one of the things that also makes it very difficult to address misconduct or even trivial instances of misconduct, and it creates a culture where there's compliance with unethical conduct, right? So you see, I learned apparently sexual harassment is common within the DoD. The person I was working with was sexually harassing me, like a female, and it was very uncomfortable. Just making flirtations, and it was a very uncomfortable experience. I'm somebody, I've never been involved with a coworker. I don't do it. All my work life, I don't do it. I've never done it. Um, I'm able to say I separate work and business. I'm a business person. No matter how nice, I don't do it, and it's rude, especially if the person is higher than you. You're new. So this was my experience. There are other things the person was doing, but I'll do that. I'll talk about that in another video and talk about the sexual harassment, the racial discrimination, the work I was given. Again, I was very grateful to the U.S. Those are things why I gave up on a lot of things that I wanted to do once the U.S. federal government hired me as a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow. When I now found out I was actually the number one pick, it blew my mind. That, my God, how is it that I'm somebody that first of all, there are people who are pissed. I would later learn that because just being picked and they're saying, okay, you're going to be a future leader of the Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Defense, and one wasn't born here, and I'm a black person, right? And I wasn't in the military. I didn't serve. I was a civilian, by the way. I was a civilian personnel, not uniformed, not a service member. And of course, it blows some people's mind because people start from the bottom. I have classmates who were classmates in law school, who were who were working in this, in uniform and all that. Now, as a McCain fellow, I automatically flew over those, people. I'm on a track that flies over that. So it was funny because I had to take a step backwards when I went to law school. So you never know. But when I came out as a McCain fellow, it's like a springboard. So the 1 year is supposed to be a development program. It's a training program, right? It's a leadership development program. But you're paid as a federal government employee. They pay you money. I think current McCain fellows, they can be paid as much as $131,000 a year, and that's a lot that's a lot of money for a civil servant in the U.S. That's just starting, right? That's their beginning pay. 131,000. Apart from that, they have other incentives, they have other package. If they have student loan, the federal government pays that. They pay them, they give them other incentives. So that's a lot. My package was they've implemented new changes, because it's um, it's again, remember America in our Constitution, our preamble, it says, we the people, in order to make a more perfect union. So we get better. And my experience in the Department of Defense, the fact that they cover up, they have a culture of collusion, that they have these cliques, they're like cartels, that they cover up um, any instance any instance of pointing out misconduct, even if it's a peccadillo, something trivial, right? They blow it out of the molehill and immediately they eliminate that person instead of address it. So you see, they're not. My experience, is, and they're like silos of the DoD. You see, a lot of the people, they're actually not good leaders. And that was another reason why they wanted the McCain Fellow. But if people from the McCain Fellow, people who should have talent, if they're being forced to conform to a culture that there's groupthink, in a culture where they don't even know how to introspect and self-develop, they don't know how to build, how to address, be constructive and develop, then it's just not going to improve. It's not going to improve. In the private sector, it values conflict in the workplace, and you see they do so well how they manage conflict. But the Department of Defense, U.S. federal government, they're just terrible. And then I guess that's bureaucracy, and I'd never seen a bureaucracy before. I remember when I was in an investment firm, one of the big ones, well, COVID Securities is now called Wells Fargo. I had a boss who had been worked on Wall Street and moved to DC, and he used to disparage. His typical, talk was, look, if you people, untalented people should go and join the federal government, and that untalented people, lazy people, those were that's the image people from Wall Street have. People in the private sector that are high performing, and so that's not good for you. The image of the U.S. federal government, it's not good at all. But from my experience, you see there are illegal things that go on it, and so it's not difficult if they falsify records to get rid of somebody, if they lie, right? If they say somebody who's not a threat makes threats, if they do this easily, think. So when they're colluding to embezzle millions of dollars, right, in a team, they'll never be held accountable. Nobody will ever be held accountable. If they're on little matters, trivial things, if there's a culture of collusion and they demonize and they falsify records, then when it's something very large, what are they going to do, right? And when money is involved, like millions of dollars, what are they going to do? Even maybe hundreds of millions of dollars. And so you see these, there's a culture of fraud, waste, and mismanagement. And it's funny that is actually illegal in the U.S. federal government. I'm going to continue with my discussion on the John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow experience, how I experienced discrimination. Again, it was a marvelous thing that I was selected to be a future senior leader of the U.S. Department of Defense, right? The largest public government department in the world, the richest government department in the world. And I wasn't just picked, I was actually the number one pick, right? And not based on diversity. I remember the person I was working with thought it was a diversity program that they brought in. And I don't know how they could have thought it was a diversity program if I was the only black person, right, in my cohort. Again, there was another black person there was another black male who was half black, half white, right? And if you look at the cohort this year, they're all white, right? There's not a single black person, not a single Asian person, and I don't know. So America's diverse, but it's performance based, and yeah. So I'll continue in another video. My name's Oluru Timosha. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.